My name is Kees van Ommeren. I'm a partner of Decisio, which is a private research company based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. On behalf of the Dutch Ministry of Transport, we carried out a research project on the cost effectiveness of electric road systems in the Netherlands. We did that together with EV consultant Sweco, and we were guided by a team of experts from the ministry. What we did is make an analysis of an ERS system using overhead catenary charging, as you can see in the picture. The main conclusions of the study were the following. Well, first of all, an ERS network on the most important highways in the Netherlands could be cost effective under certain conditions. It could also be a cost effective way to reduce CO2 emissions. That is because the ERS network is mostly interesting to trucks and lorries that travel a longer distance, whereas on the short term battery solutions will be mostly used by trucks that travel shorter distances. We also found out that an ERS network on a single corridor is not cost effective in the Dutch situation. And of course, there are a lot of uncertainties. For example, the cost reductions of batteries. We assumed a reduction, of course, but if the reduction in the future will be higher than expected, that it could change the conclusions. Also, a faster than expected cost reduction of battery electric vehicles is an uncertainty, and especially Tesla has announced a very cheap full electric lorry that could go for 1,000 kilometers per day. That might be a game changer. And of course, the expected use of the network is an important uncertainty. There's a classical chicken-egg problem with electric road systems. And the problem is that it is a network that you have to build, which is an extensive network, and of course it will only become interesting to trucks when a lot of demand is being serviced by the network, and hence the cost of using the network is acceptable. And of course it takes time to build a network, and then it will also take time before there's enough demand to come to interesting prices. What we did in the analysis is make different network alternatives and research how many truck kilometers would we expect to make use of the ERS network, and from that basis we can calculate the prices and assess whether these prices for charging are competitive to battery electric charging. This chart shows the expected total cost of ownership of different types of trucks in 2030. And you can see in this graph that the battery electric trucks that can drive 400 and 800 kilometers, those are the two on the right hand side of the graph, are more or less competitive to the columns next to that. So the OBEV 100 and OBEV 250, those are overhead battery electric vehicles. The 100 being able to drive for 100 kilometers, and the 250 kilometers. I must say that this was the expectation of another project done by Movares, an engineering firm. They just assumed, they made very rough assumption about the demand of the ERS, the electric road system. And what we did in our project is make a more specific analysis of that. In this graph you can see the three networks that we researched in our project. You can see on the first network was a one corridor between Amsterdam and Eindhoven in the Netherlands. The second one are the most important highways in the Netherlands used by trucks. And the third one are all highways used by trucks in the Netherlands. And then of course we needed to make assumptions what part of the trucks driving on those networks would use ERS. And we thought of 4 conditions that we applied to the traffic on the network. The first one is that trucks have to use at least 70% of the ERS network related to the total distance that they drive on a day, to make sure that they can recharge sufficiently on the network. The second condition is that origin and destination are not longer than 30 kilometers from the network. The third one is that it is also very important that trucks drive a relatively stable pattern throughout the year, because if an entrepreneur will not like to use ERS when part of the year clients cannot be reached. And the fourth assumption and condition is that the longer the daily distance trucks drive, the higher the chance that they will use an overhead system instead of a battery electrical vehicle, which of course makes sense, because if you need a battery to make the 30 kilometers from the ERS network and back, which is about 60 or 70 or 80 kilometers, and if the total travel distance is only 150, then it will probably be it will not be a very more expensive investment for the truck owner to invest in a bigger battery. So these are the 4 conditions that we applied to the traffic on those networks. What you see here is a complex graph. It shows for the 3 networks the total cost of ownership of overhead truck compared with a battery electric truck. And you see on the right hand side of the graph, you see the daily distances that trucks drive, and you can see that on the lower hand, the lower row of the graph is assumed that all traffic of driving 180 kilometers or longer is supposed to use the ERS system. Above that it's 150 kilometers per day, and above that 120 kilometers a day. And as I said before, the longer the distance, the more likely truck owners will use the network, because the advantages are bigger. Well, that graph is very complex, so perhaps if you're interested, we can send you the presentation and you can take a look at it yourself. But the main conclusions from that graph are that for the variant 1, so the network with one corridor, we've shown that battery electric vehicles are always more cost effective than overhead battery electric vehicles. But on the other hand, if you look at variants 2 and 3, so that those are the larger networks, ERS networks in the Netherlands, we can show that the TCO, the total cost of ownership of overhead catenary trucks, are better, more interesting than fully battery electric vehicles. And And this is even true if only the trucks that drive more than 180 kilometers per day use the ERS. So hence the conclusion is that ERS networks can be cost effective in the Netherlands. We also looked at the societal impacts of an ERS network. Some important aspects to mention are that the nuisance of construction of the network is expected to be limited because it can be compared with maintenance projects of the highways. It is positive that it will lead to a reduction of carbon emissions compared to the situation where the evolution of battery electrical vehicles goes as expected. And some important issues, of course, are the deeper investments in the electricity network, which is very difficult to compare those investments necessary for an ERS network compared with the same investments necessary for charging points at near highways or at companies themselves. We also carried out some sensitivity analyses, and most important sensitivities are a faster decrease of the battery costs than expected, a faster decrease of fully battery electric trucks than expected, and a lower use of the ERS network than expected. So all in all, we concluded that an ERS network can be cost effective compared to battery electric trucks. But of course there are a lot of uncertainties that have to be monitored, and some extra research has to be done. You can see some of those aspects mentioned on this slide. Most important for the Dutch government, I think, is apart from monitoring these developments, is also making sure that if we decide to build an ERS network, we don't do that by ourselves, but we can only do that internationally, and only if more countries do that, then it will lead to a better supply of and a competitive supply of overhead catenary trucks, and also more technical developments which will help making it more interesting. I thank you for your attention.